So this is the story of Krishna fighting with a giant serpent named Kaliya. And Kaliya was an enormous, gigantic snake with many heads or hoods, and it was also a very poisonous serpent. So Kaliya's other name is Kaliya Naga. Naga means snake. So this story of Krishna defeating the Kaliya snake is one of many stories of Krishna's childhood pastimes where he was fighting with demoniac elements or powerful beings who were creating trouble for others. So Kaliya was one of these individuals. So there is a big river in Vrindavan called the Yamuna River, and part of this Yamuna River was formed into a sort of a lake, a large body of water, and Kaliya took refuge within this lake and was living there, but he had a very poisonous effect on the other living beings that were in that area. Birds that would fly over would fall out of the sky dead, and anyone who would drink the water from that lake would also die because he had a very powerful poisonous effect which contaminated the waters of the Yamuna River and was causing distress for all sorts of living entities in that area. And in addition, the trees and the grasses and all the plants that were growing in that area were all dying as well due to the poisonous effect. And because of this poisonous effect, some of Krishna's friends and some of Krishna's cows were overcome by the poison and they became unconscious. This was very alarming for the residents of Vrindavan, and so they took shelter of Krishna and asked him to remedy the situation. Krishna immediately ran to that place where the Kaliya serpent was, and he decided to take action to challenge the Kaliya snake. So Krishna was going to jump into the water, but all the trees in that area had died except for one tree, one Kadamba tree. So Krishna climbed up on that tree and he adjusted his clothing and tightened his belt and got ready for combat with this snake. And that tree was the only living tree in the area, and some people say that it was known in advance that Krishna would jump from this tree, so some nectar was put onto that tree to keep it alive and make it immune from the poison of the Kaliya snake. So Krishna began flapping his arms and making bravado kind of motions like he was a great wrestler about ready to wrestle with an opponent. So he jumped into the lake, and immediately there was a huge wave that splashed all across the banks, all around that lake, as if a gigantic object had fallen into the lake that would have been much bigger than Krishna himself. So this was the effect of Krishna. He was much larger influence than an ordinary living entity. So Krishna begins making a tumultuous noise as if to challenge the Kaliya snake to a fight. So the snake was very aware of Krishna's presence because he was making a calamitous noise to bring attention to his presence. So the Kaliya serpent immediately understood that Krishna was coming to challenge him to a sort of a combat, and he became very angry with Krishna, and he immediately approached Krishna, but he was very bewildered by the beautiful form of Krishna, and he was wondering, how can this little small child challenge my authority? It was very bewildering for the Kaliya serpent. Krishna had been dressed very nicely by his mother, Mother Yasoda, and he was wearing many ornaments and yellow garment, which looked very lustrous and beautiful. And Krishna was also smiling and joking and not taking this battle very seriously because, of course, he is the Supreme Lord, and so he has no worry or concern about being defeated by any living entity, even a very powerful living entity like the Kaliya serpent. So the Kaliya serpent became very angry and immediately grabbed Krishna and locked him up in the coils of the serpent's body. And this put all of the residents of Vrindavan who had come to watch into a great state of anxiety. They immediately became overwhelmed with fear that Krishna was in severe danger from this huge venomous snake. So some of the residents of Vrindavan were crying, and some of them were falling on their knees, praying that Krishna would be saved, and some of them fainted in anxiety, and all of them were hoping that Krishna would be successful in defeating the Kaliya serpent. And gradually the news spread that Krishna was in danger, and so almost all the inhabitants came to the scene, and they followed Krishna's footprints to see where he had gone, and they came to this spot by the river Yamuna to observe this situation. Just at this time, some inauspicious signs developed. The wind blew out of nowhere, meteors were falling from the sky, and inauspicious omens began to appear. So people began to feel that Krishna was in very extreme danger, and not only that, the whole world was in danger, because when Krishna is in danger, everything is in danger. But Lord Balaram was standing by, and he was smiling because he understood Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no way that an ordinary snake in the material world is going to defeat Krishna. So he was waving people back, telling them not to worry about anything. Krishna had the situation under control, and they shouldn't worry. So he was trying to calm the crowd of residents of Vrindavan who had assembled there. So one of the important aspects of the story is that a devotee of Krishna should feel anxiety for Krishna, and he should be willing to give his life up in order to serve Krishna. And many of these residents wanted to jump into the river to save Krishna, including Mother Yasoda. Mother Yasoda wanted to jump in all by herself and save Krishna from this serpent. But Lord Balaram checked these people and would not allow them to enter into the river. But this is a great story illustrating the separation a devotee feels for Krishna when Krishna is going to be absent from them or is absent from them. So a devotee should feel Krishna's presence even in separation. This is one of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. We should feel Krishna's presence even when we are separated. So this story happened as a means of increasing the love and affection that the residents of Vrindavan had for Krishna. So when Mother Yasoda tried to enter the water to save Krishna, and she was checked by Lord Balaram, she fainted on the spot. She could not tolerate seeing Krishna in this condition. So Krishna remained wrapped in the coils of the serpent for several hours, and he looked like an ordinary child who had been gripped by the coils of a snake. But when he saw that the inhabitants of Gokula, including his mother and father, the gopis, the boys and the cows, were on the point of death, and they had no shelter for salvation from imminent death, Krishna immediately freed himself. He began to expand his body, and when the serpent tried to hold him, he felt a great strain. On account of the strain, his coils slackened, and he had no alternative but to let loose Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Kaliya then became very angry, and he began to spew more poison out to try to overwhelm Krishna with his poisonous, venomous exhaling. Kaliya also had the potency to make flames emanate from his mouth, so he was making flames come out to try to attack Krishna in this way. But Krishna was able to slip away from his grasp, and eventually Krishna jumped up and stood on the heads of Kaliya, and he began to move to and fro, making it very difficult for Kaliya to capture him. He was moving very, very quickly, and eventually he began dancing on the heads of the Kaliya serpent. And as Krishna was dancing to and fro on the heads of the serpent, the denizens of the higher planets, the demigods, began to shower flowers down onto Krishna in great appreciation of his wonderful activities. And in this way, the denizens of the higher planets, such as the Gandharvas, the Siddhas, and the demigods, began to play musical instruments and dance along with Krishna's dancing. So the Kaliya serpent eventually became very fatigued, and Krishna was wearing him down, and instead of spewing poison, he began to spew blood and vomit, and he became very defeated by Krishna's kicking on his heads. And the more he would try to move his heads around and grab Krishna, Krishna would grab his head and push it down and then dance on top of his heads. So in this way, Kaliya was more and more and more being exhausted and fatigued and subdued by Krishna. So all of these attacks by Krishna on the Kaliya serpent were actually purifying him of his sins. And gradually, due to the loss of his sinful reactions because of the efforts of Krishna, he began to realize that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and there is no way he could be defeated by an ordinary mortal being in this material world. So he realized Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Krishna, by touching the Kaliya serpent, purified him of his sins. So this is one of the benefits of fighting with Krishna. One's sins will be minimized or nullified, and perhaps one will realize Krishna is the Supreme Person. But there are many examples of Krishna fighting with various evil forces when he was here, and all of them benefited in different ways by fighting with Krishna. And even grandfather Bhishma wanted to fight with Krishna because he wanted to see Krishna in his fighting form, and he was happy if Krishna would have killed him in a battle, because he would have seen Krishna in a ferocious fighting form, which is very blissful for a devotee. So either way, if we are fighting Krishna in a, let's say, evil manner or a devotional manner, it's always beneficial to come in contact with Krishna in however means that happens. So Kaliya eventually began to understand that Krishna is the Supreme Being, and he tried to surrender and bow his hoods in respect to Krishna. But in the meantime, the wives of the Kaliya snake, called the Nagapatnis, saw that their husband was being brutally subdued by the kicking of Krishna, and so they were very alarmed, and they came before the Lord without even having time to dress themselves properly. So these wives of the Kaliya serpent presented themselves before the Lord with very humble prayers, and they begged the Lord to please be merciful on their husband, and they also brought their offspring to show to Krishna to further enhance the idea that Krishna should give them some mercy. But anyway, they also prayed that Krishna, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and everyone is dependent on your shelter, so we are taking shelter of you. So please kindly be merciful to us and save our husband from your wrath. So the Nagapatnis began to pray to Krishna, my dear Lord, you are equal to everyone. For you there is no difference between your sons, friends, enemies, and family. Therefore the punishment which you are giving to Kaliya is befitting to him, because, after all, he has a serpent body because he has been very sinful in his previous life. So he deserves some type of punishment. At the same time, we think the punishment you are giving him is relieving him of his sinful reactions. So everything you do is ultimately beneficial. So you are benefiting our husband indirectly, and we are very pleased that he has been able to have the feet of the Supreme Lord dancing on his heads, because this will save him in so many ways. Especially it will reduce his sinful accumulated reactions. At the same time, although our husband must be a very sinful living entity, he must have done some pious activities, because otherwise he would not have been touched by the feet of the Supreme Lord. So his pious activities have come to fruit as well as his sinful activities, but to be touched by the Lord is a great blessing, and we deeply appreciate your mercy on him by doing that. In other words, the wives of the Kaliya serpent were very astonished that their husband was very sinful. Simultaneously, he had done something very pious, so there was a big mixture of his past activities coming into fruition at this present time, and it was very bewildering to many people. So the Nagapatnis concluded, it is only by your mercy that a person can be liberated from this material entanglement and taking repeated births and deaths in so many species of life. So please be merciful to our husband and be merciful to us and save us by helping us go back to the spiritual kingdom with you. So the Nagapatnis continued, my dear Lord, you are the Supreme Person. You are living as the Super Soul within all living entities throughout the universe. You are transcendental to the cosmic manifestation, but you are also the cause of the creation of the cosmic manifestation. Everything is resting on you like pearls strung on a thread. You are the personified eternal time. The time force is existing within you and without you. You are the seer of all. You are the embodiment of all. And you are the controller of time in the shape of past, present, future, everything. You are perfectly all the activities happening in every moment and every hour and every day and every year, past, present, future, in all living entities. You are yourself the universe, and yet you are different from the universe. You are one and different from everything, and simultaneously you are everything. The Nagapatnis continued, our dear Lord, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and you appear just as a tiny child who would challenge a giant serpent, and we are very bewildered by these pastimes, which no ordinary person can understand. Even the greatest philosophers, they speculate for many millions of years, but they cannot understand who you are and what you are doing. It is only by your mercy that we are able to see who you are, but only partially. We can only understand a very tiny fraction of you and your power. We understand that the only path to peace is by worshiping one of your incarnations, such as Lord Vishnu. And since we are women, we are very dependent on our husband to maintain us, so we are begging you to please be merciful to our husband and save him and help him become a sober and sane devotee of you, so we can all live together peacefully under your direction. Meanwhile, the Kaliya serpent woke up from being knocked unconscious by Krishna, and he folded his hands and began to pray. My dear Lord, I have a serpent's body which is naturally very envious and angry. Please forgive my behavior. I am a conditioned soul, conditioned by my bodily situation, and I acted in ignorance Please forgive my ignorance. I now know who you are. You are the Supreme Person, and it is a great offense on my part to challenge your authority. So Krishna was very, very pleased by the prayers of Kaliya serpent and his wives, and he blessed them and told them to go live in the ocean, and you will not be in any distress there because you came up to the Yamuna River out of fear of Garuda, who is my servant. But Garuda will see my footprints on your body, and he will know you are now blessed by me, and he will not harm you or cause you any distress any further, and you can live peacefully. So anyone who hears the story about Krishna fighting the Kaliya serpent should no longer have any fear of snakes. This is one of the blessings of hearing this narration. So the Kaliya snake departed from the Yamuna River with all of his wives and paraphernalia, and he went back to live in the ocean peacefully, and once again the Yamuna was purified, and all of the boys and cows who had been knocked unconscious by the poison of Kaliya serpent all came back to life, and they understood they only came back to life by the glance of Krishna reviving their existence. So they were very appreciative to Krishna for bringing them back to life after being attacked by the poison of the Kaliya snake. So it is sometimes said that the living entities who have fallen into the material world have been affected by the poison of being associated with the material energy, and once they regain their connection to Krishna, they come back to life again to be with Krishna eternally. So it is like we have been attacked by a poison of trying to be independent of Krishna, and if Krishna glances on us again, he can revive us back to our original eternal life. And I dedicate this narration to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. By His grace, we have been given these pastimes of Krishna for us to meditate on, and this is the most auspicious thing one can do in life, is to understand who is Krishna and what is our relationship with Krishna. Hari Bol.